Hi, friends. Oh my goodness, my voice is changing. Hi, friends. Welcome to Eyes of My Heart. I want to share a beautiful healing story in the Bible today. And one of the reasons I love it is because, I believe that when healing comes, when Jesus was healing people, that was a big part of his ministry. Um, the healing wasn't just physical, that there were lessons in that healing that the people observing could learn. There were things in that healing process, that healing story that we can learn that goes beyond a physical healing. And that's what jumps to me from this particular story. And it's also a story where Jesus elevates the status of women. Because in that culture, women were basically property. They certainly did not have the rights and privileges that the men had. And Jesus, he sees that. And he makes a statement through this healing that really flips all of those ways of looking at women upside down. And I'm just going to read the story, and then let's reflect on it and see not only how beautiful it was for then, but what are the implications for it? What are the beautiful truths that it has for us today that go beyond a physical healing? It's in Mark chapter 5. A large crowd was following Jesus and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all that she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples said, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched you?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. And he said to her, Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." I love that. Have you ever had a chronic condition where you had gone from doctor to doctor to doctor? You had tried treatment after treatment after treatment. And not only were you not getting better, you were getting worse. And not only that, but you've now spent all your money on health care. We know how that can go. And you're desperate. You can't function in life anymore because of this chronic condition. In this story, this was a woman who had an issue of bleeding, it says. We don't know exactly what it was. It could have been kind of like a female problem. Sometimes with fibroid tumors, women bleed continually. There's cramping, there's pain, there's excruciating pain. It could have been a female problem. It could have been another sort of bleeding disorder. We're not sure. But it was some sort of continual kind of hemorrhaging, bleeding. And in that day, women who even had their menstrual period, you could not be in public because you were considered unclean. So if this woman has had an issue of bleeding for 12 years, she was probably ostracized by people. She wasn't allowed, if she was in a chronic condition of bleeding, to enter the temple. There were ceremonies she had to go through to cleanse herself before she could go back out in public. So there was a stigma upon her. She'd been labeled and had an identity that was attached to this problem that she had. And she's desperate. I mean, clearly we can see here. It says she's been to doctor after doctor, spent all of her money, and is getting worse. 12 years. Probably a social suffering as well as a physical suffering. The sense of shame, embarrassment, knowing that people were wanting to avoid her, judging her. That's a heavy burden to bear. So here it is. She hears of Jesus and she decides, she has a thought. It all started with a thought. Sometimes when we change our thinking, it puts us on a whole new trajectory. And that was a very different kind of thought, because up to that point, her thought was, I need another doctor. I need another treatment. It'd be like me getting online with, I have a symptom or a chronic symptom. I'm like Googling everything. I'm going to try this. I'm going to do that. Finally, something happens and I have a brand new thought. And it is like so opposite of what she had been thinking. But now she has to act upon it. And her thought is, if I just touch his clothes, I'm going to be healed. Where does a thought like that come from? Made no sense. It was a completely different thought. But she acted upon it. And so the story goes that she's in the crowd and she sneaks up behind Jesus. She does not even want to be seen, because she shouldn't have been there, number one, if she's a woman with an issue of bleeding. And she touched his clothes. And it says immediately she felt healing in her body. I don't know what that felt like. You know what you would feel like with your chronic pain or your chronic condition for 12 years. So whatever it was, she immediately knew it's gone. It is gone. That is gone. Everything I've been suffering. Wow. And then it says, Jesus felt power go out of him. He wasn't trying to heal her, but he felt energy go out of him. And I'm a firm believer in quantum physics that we are all energy. That's just science. We can see that. And we have the energy of God within us. He breathed within us the breath of life. And I believe there's energy that's good, energy that's low, high. Have you ever been in the presence of someone with you can't explain it, but there's an energy within them, and when you leave, you just feel like your heart's been lifted. Maybe some of your pain is gone. I don't know. Maybe it helps you relax. And then you've been in the presence of someone else and you leave and your energy is like, oh my gosh, I just had the life sucked out of me. So there is something about the energy that we carry with us. And I believe that we all can be healing agents in the world. Jesus told his disciples, you're going to be able to do the same works I have, even more. So let's pay attention to these stories. When things happen and we just dismiss them and say, oh, that only Jesus can do that. He's showing us something, what it means to be fully human and to know our fullest self in the love of Christ, of Jesus, and to be the light and the healing agents in this world. So he stops and he's like, who touched my clothes? And the disciples are like, Jesus, everybody's bumping up against you and you're asking who touched you? He's like, no. This was different. The energy went out of me and it touched that energy of faith in someone else. And something happened. There was something that happened here. Who touched me? I felt my energy go out into them. And it seems like in reading this that she did not immediately come forth. But then she did. Jesus is looking around the crowd. And finally this woman comes forth. And it says she was in fear and trembling and fell at his feet because she knew she was a woman with an issue of bleeding, should not have been in that crowd, and certainly should not have touched a Jewish male rabbi. But she falls at his feet and it says, listen to this, she told him the whole story. So it wasn't like it's me, Jesus, it's me. I don't know, did she start 12 years back and just the whole story came falling out of how she felt when it started, the ramifications of it, how desperate she was. But Jesus listened because it said he stopped. He had been on a mission. He was ministering. People were following him and he stopped it all. Wanted to find that woman. Let her share her entire story and he listened. Even the the healing, restoring power of listening to somebody, being fully present to them. And he's doing this publicly, remember. And all the people knew, probably, she's this unclean woman. She shouldn't have been here. Jesus should be chastising her and telling her she broke these ceremonial religious laws and she needs to go away. He didn't. He didn't even ask her religious background. He didn't say, you need to say the sinner's prayer. You need to do this. He didn't even address that. He listened completely to her story. And you know what he said at the end? Daughter. Titles and families were critically important in the Jewish faith. And so to call her daughter was giving her a title of great significance. This Jewish rabbi who was touched by this unclean woman, she comes in, pours out her whole story, and he listens and he says, daughter. Right there in front of everybody who had labeled her probably unclean if they knew her story, and obviously they did when she got done with it. That just thrills me. Who are the people in our world today that we label and say, you're not part of the family of God? He listened. He listened. It didn't say he pointed out one thing that she had done wrong, and she had, according to those religious ceremonial rules. He just said, daughter, your faith, that faith that grew up from that thought that became a seed in your heart and you acted upon it, you embraced it, it touched the energy and something transpired there. He said, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. It was probably maybe the first time in 12 years that she had an inner peace and was freed from her suffering, not just the physical issue of bleeding, but the suffering that had been placed upon her by her culture, her social community, even her faith community, perhaps. She was no longer ostracized. She was called daughter by Jesus. That speaks to me, friends. How does that speak to you today? I want that kind of love, that kind of energy, that kind of power to be flowing out of my life. And it makes me have to stop and say, what blocks it then? You know, we are in a world, we interact with people all the time. He was in a big crowd bumping up against people, and this one person, he felt that energy go out of him, and it brought healing into her life. I need to know that kind of healing in my own life, but I also want to be a healing agent that has that energy of love, of Christ in me, that people can touch my life in some way. And not even, she was healed before they even spoke, from just touching his clothes. I'm going to leave it here and just ask you to open your heart and see how it falls upon your heart today. God bless you guys. May you know the healing. If you've suffered with something chronically, emotionally, physically, spiritually for a long time and it's wearing you out, may you know that healing. And may you be that healing agent in the world, perhaps to those who have been labeled and ostracized. Let it be, oh God, let it be.